I hope you enjoyed your coffee. It's on to the next session entitled One Team, One Fight, and we're going to examine how we're going to work ever closer with our partners from industry. And I'm actually, for this session, going to leave you in the very capable hands of Air Vice-Marshal Jim Beck, who is the RAF's Director of Capability, who's going to lead this session. So over to you.
We want to do this subtly differently, as I've been asked to introduce the concept and the subject. And I've got a couple of slides that I want to run through to sort of set the global view of how we work this together. First of all, picture two young fighter pilots of different nationalities walking across the pan at red flag, which for me is the World Cup of fighter pilots. They'll be talking about the capabilities of the jets, the range of the missiles, their TTPs. The one thing they won't be covering is the sovereignty, the capabilities, and the resourcefulness of their own defence industrial base. In fact, we vilified it. However, if you go back 80 years, you can come to various cartoons that were produced on the internet. And as I scrolled through on Google, there were thousands. And this was to champion the defence industrial base as a gear of the totality of the warfighting machine. This particular cartoon was not aimed actually at the defence industrial base, but the population of the United States of America, to say, you are suffering hardship, but that hardship is necessary to move those resources into the war machine, which is our defence industrial base. The evidence that we have for the Second World War is rather compelling. Literature is masses. But looking at the chart on the right-hand side, what you'll see is that we significantly geared above that of Germany and Japan at the time. And we watched the US and the Soviet Union almost race each other from about 43 onwards. Almost everybody will concur that this was part of the success. Germany had amassed forces prior to the Second World War, had mobilized them and moved them in a way that was tactically above those adversaries it faced. And around about 1941, there was a pivot point where its industrial base could no longer produce at the same rate that we were. And it became a war of attrition. And that is what we are seeing today. There's one other observation. There are various reasons that underpin this. But if you look at the inflection point of Britain, around 1943, the chart goes down. And that was two reasons. One, our defence industrial base was targeted by the Germans. But more importantly, we saw the American system take the resources it was firing to the British system and actually bring them back in. It sought sovereignty, and that is the value you take from this. For the Russian perspective, it's a very different beast. And what you see is they emerge from a Soviet system, and that system itself saw about 40% of GDP, 40% of government spending spent on its military from about 1990. It never grew out of that Soviet architecture as it moved into Russia. And what you see on this chart, on the right-hand side of each column, is how it gains money. It's called the Sector 1 part of its ability to garner money. That is commodities, so that is grain, that is petroleum, that is gas. And it uses that to offset a very inefficient Sector 2, which is its defence industrial base. During peacetime, it's not good value for money. It doesn't offer benefits for the best ruble that they put in. But come war, it's got huge resource sat behind it that's inefficient that it can gear to scale. It is resilient. What we're saying, though, is this is a model that we want to employ for all of us, but is a model we've got to go against, and China is running a very similar system. For the markets that we compete in, we've seen an explosion of increase in defence spending. The Americas seems to flatline for a long period of time, albeit it is growing nominally at the rate of baseline inflation. But Europe and the Asias are growing above it. The problem is by pumping money into the defence industrial base, without the defence industrial base growing at a commensurate rate, the goods, the services, the basket that the defence sector so requires, unfortunately will see inflation. And independent on where you look around the world, we're seeing defence inflation rise above the baseline rate between 4 and 9%. This isn't good for warfighting. This just means we spend more on the same thing. So we've got to be very clever about how we orchestrate our own defence industrial base so it grows commensurate with the rate of spending, so we get the best bang for our buck. Globally, we looked at increased rates. I passed this to scientists to see if there was any sort of themes underpinning it, and they came back and just said it's chaotic. It is a chaotic world. We then sat, and we were very lucky to have a week with the French, where we looked at similar sovereign defence industrial bases, similar aspirations, and the question we set ourselves was, what would we need to do to move to a wartime economy? The fact is, the conclusions were that we would have a GDP growth into the defence industrial base that just would not cut it in peacetime. You need to see between 9, 13 and even 20%, and government spending needs to be between 30 and 40% in its defence sector. The prioritisation would see hardship in the civil sector, and in peacetime there isn't the appetite to do so. But I think what's interesting is innovation and the change in behaviour as you move into a wartime economy. What you'll see is the desire to go deep into the basket of research and pull out those long lead items that take massive investment, but more importantly, massive time, disregarded in favour of things that the military can get hold of quickly and give to the warfighter sooner. You know you're moving to a wartime economy when the ratio between investment in research and production changes in favour of production. To summarise that really, have a look at the spend rate of Ukraine over the last 10 years. This is something that no nation would want in peacetime. So my final slide focuses on the so what of this one. We've constantly spoken about a need to do things differently, and even in the last panel that was covered. However, if you are building a platform, for example the F-16 that takes 5 to 10 years to develop, yep, that is too long, that is too costly. But if you're getting a return of investment of 50 years in the case of the F-16 and Tornadoes that we're celebrating this year, actually those ratios are far better than if you're looking at a capability with what we call a Moore's law of only a year. So it hits its technical half-life in only a year. These are the areas where we go into the wartime economy, you actually start seeing us grab. And the conclusion really from this is, if it takes a long time to produce, a long time to develop, and has a long shelf life, it is unlikely in warfare you're going to see a ramp up in those capabilities. Russian aviation is a great example of that. But if they are low-tech textures with a very short half-life, you'll actually see that they rapidly explode into the defence industrial base. And that draws me to 3 conclusions. We need a different approach, but we need a different approach to procurement for specific technologies, not all of it. We need to look at our defence industrial base as a full spectrum of capabilities, not just those that we regularly see, for example, aircraft. And we need to assume what we'll have in warfare and understand what is scalable in war and what is not. And that activity that is not scalable in warfare is what we need to mass prior to going into it. So I'm now going to hand over to Susan to give us your thoughts on the subject.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jim, and to my esteemed industry colleagues. It's fantastic to be here and be part of this panel conversation. I'm really privileged and lucky to be part of the defence sector and the air sector for 25 years. And through that time, I've been really privileged to see firsthand the importance of partnerships between government, industry, the civil service, and the military. And we're really proud of what we do to play our part in that activity. So there's 3 areas I think that industry can play to do even more to help us fly, fight, and win. We clearly need a resilient system of operation to win. And I believe an industry plays, with our supply chains, an absolutely critical role in that process. An industry can facilitate and the opportunity to bring together different companies, different capabilities, look at that end-to-end supply chain and process, and piece those parts together and build resilience into that system. By doing that, and we've already picked up that through conversations this morning, that is a strong deterrent to our aggressors. What resilience means today versus what it meant 5-10 years ago is evolving and changing. An industry, we are thinking about what our resilience models need to be as we pivot to war fighting, and how we work together to support things like agile combat employment that's already been discussed, and Jeffrey picked that up this morning. It is going to change and look different. And as we need different points of presence, where industry play, where military play, along that continuum and along that supply chain, and where they need to be deployed will evolve and change. But with that focus on resilience and industry playing that part, we absolutely can be stronger together. To win, we need people and skills, and we know that's a key topic for a number of our customers. And industry can provide a multiplier in that space. We're all operating in that same pool of requiring those skills and technologies and capabilities, and there are different ways that we can absolutely secure it. One thing that we have been doing, and we need to do more of, is look together on those people strategies. We are going into that same pool. We have to do the same things. We have to attract talent. We have to retain talent. We have to grow talent. And we need to train our people. They are common themes. And the more that we can work together and understand what our people's strategies are across military, government, industry, we can absolutely look at best practice and actually maybe invest in common themes to make sure that we have that pool available across that end-to-end system to make sure that we achieve the outcomes that we need. And to win, we also need commitment and trust. And this has come up a number of times in the panel that we had previously. How do we serve and protect? How does everybody within the nations play their part? And in industry players in that defence sector, how do we make sure that our people are motivated and focused on the right things? I certainly know through working on the F-35 programme, in our factories, people really care about what they do. They care about the quality of the product they deliver, so our pilots can be safe. They care that the military have the right capability to defend our nation. And what that delivers is discretionary effort. People that care, wanted to provide, want to be part of that whole defence force. And as this threat environment changes, how we pull on that and how we galvanise that across the outcomes that we need is going to be really, really important. And how we pivot that to war-fighting scenarios and how we take our people on that journey across both military and industry is going to be absolutely key. And I can certainly say from my own experience, people are already seeing signs of that threat environment increasing as industry is targeted through certain scenarios already. So that is a signal to our people that things are changing. So there are three areas where I think industry can absolutely play their part in fly, fight, and win. But to exploit this to full effect, we need to consider the following. We need to think about our collective risk appetite. What our risk appetite was 5 years ago compared to what it is today and what it needs to be in the future needs to change. And Jim, you picked up on that as well. How we procure, how we look at certain capabilities. That risk appetite and that requirement that Jeffrey talked about needs to be clear across that end-to-end continuum. That links to the second point about having real transparency. If we can all be clear on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and get aligned, we can use that whole resource pool to best effect, and we can work together on the plans and the risk appetite that we need to deliver that. And then we can look at our processes, our approaches to it. But if we do the first two, the processes and the approaches, I absolutely think will come for free, and it will be easier to work our way through it. So just to finish, I think there's great opportunity. There's more that we can do in collaboration between industry, military, government, and we can absolutely drive synergy through that collective resource pool and force to achieve our collective endeavours. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Dave.
It's really good to be here today to support Jim, and I was going to say, and the Air Force, but I mean all of you. I'm passionate about the whole force and close teamwork and fundamentally protecting the way of our current way of life. I absolutely echo all of what Susan has said. As I look out today, past the lights and meeting you all earlier on, I believe we're already a really tight team. I've had the pleasure of working and serving with a number of you in the Royal Air Force and the Navy, and then in the industry over the last few years. So I think we firmly have one team, one fight in our minds. However, what we do is we often meet in a haphazard, fleeting manner, and too often we talk in transactional terms. For me, the way forward is we need to be much more tightly geared, as Jim was saying, and we need to be integrated totally into the whole force. I'm very fortunate that I've really had a pretty much whole force career. So I started, probably one of the oldest, because I was thinking 40 years in the defence sector, but I started in the Royal Navy in the mid-80s, then into the Royal Air Force in the late 80s, the whole span from combat operations, MOD, acquisition, policy, HQ management, R&D. So I saw the full range of military activities. Since then, in 15 years, I've been in industry. I've worked in SMEs, and I've worked in 2 large transnational companies, and working at every level within my function as I sort of earned my spurs and learnt my trade in industry. So over that 40 years, I've seen both sides of how we work. In all of that experience, what I've seen is we can work very well together as a tight, integrated team. I've been fortunate to be involved in a number of spiral development programs into service where that actually gives you that tight teamwork. So when I was working in Thales, I was in the infrared threat warning system program, working closely with DSTL and AirCap. I was fortunate to work with Jim at the time of being the first program in the RCO with Bright Cloud, and then developing that further onto the swarming drones. We set up the Airborne Platform Protection Strategic Partnering Arrangement where we spiral develop capability, the best capability in the world for the Royal Air Force platforms, working alongside colleagues from Thales and Chemring. We also, you may see downstairs in the anterooms, some of our equipment for counter-UAS. We work very closely with the Future Capabilities Group and AirCap to develop that capability and deploy it onto frontline bases and deployed operations. And then more recently, we've worked very closely with Stratcom on developing the Krennic model, where we deliver spiral capability in the counter-RC IED fight. So we've seen lots and lots of activity where really good models, and as Susan was saying, there are exemplars out there where we can work really, really closely together. As we move forward, though, we need to really understand that it's not the advanced technology that is what gives you that true innovation. It's really the people and the teams. In all of those programs I discussed, at the heart of the true capability and how we were successful is joint teams working together. And I think we need to exploit that more now across all the DLODs. In essence, I think what we should be looking at in industry and the military-industry relationship is to hold industry as a force element in its own right. Hold us at the appropriate readiness, aligned to defence planning assumptions, and totally integrated into that whole force. I think that's what's needed and I don't like to use the phrase pre-war, I like to prevent war. That will help our deterrent posture. The spirit exists today to this. When I talk to the graduate programs, the apprentice programs, they are fiercely loyal and proud to be working with the armed forces. And they want to do more. Our experienced personnel have and continue to deploy on Condo. We have numerous field service reps, and we have some important secondees in key roles in defence. And Jim and I have been involved personally in developing one role and one individual, and it's working really well. And I think we should do much more of it. People and teams are at the heart of driving this, but what is really important again is how we, and Susan touched on this, how we look at the organisation, how we look at the structure, how we look at acquisition models, long-term partnerships, mission partners. This needs a lot of thought because we need to be able to motivate, develop, and importantly in the sector, retain our people. Because we take a long time to develop that SQEP, that experience, and we don't want to lose it. So I think we need to think carefully about how we do that. We've also touched on in the first panel about stockpiling and munitions, and Jim alluded to this as well. You can't stockpile people and SQEP. that needs to be, in today's parlance, always on, always ready. That needs long-term partnerships, that needs long-term relationships. We need to develop that, because that's going to give you that combat edge to spirally develop quickly and be able to give us that advantage. So I guess the question for us today really is, how do we take this discussion forward? How do we actually integrate and make it a true sixth domain, as NATO has been calling it, or indeed, as the new Secretary of State is calling it, one defence? I think for us, if we get that right, that makes us much stronger together and gives us that inherent deterrence, which is the subject of this conference today. So I look forward to further discussion, and I'll hand over.
David, thank you. Before we move on to Richard, I just want to highlight that Slido's open. Questions are coming in, and you can popularise those by liking them. I'd like the focus to be at the panel, so specific to a defence industrial base, not one pure of capability. So if you have one that's specific to industry and how they will adapt in warfare, then please insert on Slido. Richard.
No, thanks, Jim, and no, thanks for the invite to come to talk to you all today. I think we're already starting to hear a couple of themes in here, and it's about that, recognising that you have an extended defence force within industry who genuinely is behind the mission. Now, I think what we need to try and do is to find a way of leveraging that and finding a better way to collaborate so we can actually deliver resilience and integrated solutions across the battle space. So, I mean, today I was going to pull on sort of three main topics. One of them is probably more capability focused, so multi-domain integration, but also resilience. And I also want to talk about sovereignty as well, because from my background, which is from the cybersecurity and specifically the encryption and key management sector, sovereignty is something which is very, very close to my heart and something which we fully support. So from a multi-domain integration perspective, I believe that it's absolutely critical to enabling the UK to deliver that strategic resilience, deterrence, and integration with allies by drawing on multidisciplinary technologies spanning within and across different domains. I think in order for it to be successful, though, we need to have a fundamental change in the way we look at things. I think we still do consider things very much from a platform perspective. I think this is taking much more of a true system view, where the platforms are effectively providing support and capability into that overall system view. However, I know it's something which is widely discussed. It does need to be tightly bound in order to get best value for money. We shouldn't be looking just to integrate for integration's sake. We need to fully understand what the use cases are that we're trying to support, so that we're actually ensuring that we're getting the best value for money out of everything that we're doing. And again, this is a theme that you will hear through what I'm talking about today, and it's about we need to find that way to bring defence and industry much, much closer together. So without doing that, the MODs will not get the best value from industry unless there is a greater degree of transparency and trust between the two parties. So I think additionally to that, there's the security elements of sort of sharing information, but I still feel that there is this underlying concern that by sharing information more tightly with certain industry partners, you're in some way giving competitive advantage to them. And I think that's something which we do need to get beyond. There are organisations who have many, many years of delivering in certain domains. That's sunk investment. We need to find ways of being able to leverage that investment, to get the best value for defence and for the nation. Clearly, any integration needs to be balanced with the cost that needs to be incurred, but I think this again reiterates that need for clarity of the use cases to ensure the best value for money for defence. And that is, for me, it's really focusing on that partnership and having a true partnership. I think we talk partnership. I don't think we're there yet. I think we still have got some way to go to actually have a true partnership between defence and industry. So this sort of brings me on to my second point around resilience. So if we focus in on the space domain, so it's historically been considered as a passive force multiplier. However, I think now it's being considered as a warfighting domain in its own right. So in order to be able to achieve true resilience, we need to be able to find ways of working across all aspects of space, cyber and networking to create an end result that's far greater than the sum of its parts. So national resilience cannot be separated in any way from cybersecurity, and this must continue to be a critical element of any industrial strategy. So, in order to rightly equip the warfighter with that sort of cyber overlay, we do need to ensure that security by design principles are baked in from all angles. And this shouldn't be seen as being anything other than an absolute baseline for everything that we deliver. But then again, it just brings me back to, we do need to be able to take some risk with sharing of that information between industry and defence. So just touching on the third topic around sovereignty. So, for me, sovereignty is critical to enabling the UK's strategic imperative and its operational independence. So in order to do this, we truly need to identify and nurture those strategic partners to deliver competitive advantage to defence and national security. So just as an example, and from a national security perspective, so Airbus's leadership in MIL-SATCOM has provided our UK and allied forces with a reliable, resilient capability, which has been key to operational success. Now, through sovereignty, we're able to enable the UK to control its own capabilities. However, with the threats of the current geopolitical environment that we live in, it does require a truly allied response. So, as an example, the Airbus Skynet capability is now delivering global connectivity to a number of NATO nations. I think it's 17 NATO nations. So it's delivering that overall capability. Just as a further concrete example, sort of close to the world that I live in, which is crypt-key. Crypt-key is a pervasive technology. It's core to national security. It's delivered by a number of tightly bound companies, so tight industry partners. I think a while ago there was a recognition that this industry was under quite a lot of pressure, and there's been a lot of work done to actually to reinvigorate and grow that industry. And the number of companies who are operating this domain has now increased quite significantly. So ultimately, in order to deliver success on the battlefield, there needs to be an enhanced level of collaboration between government and the defence industry. And we also need to focus on ensuring that we are pulling together the various domains to get the best value out of what we're delivering as a partnership. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm over.
Thank you. Jill has expressed a desire for the lectern, so please take it.
I promise you it's not because I'm going to speak for 20 minutes. It's because I have a short video in just a moment. So first of all, good morning, and thank you, Jim, for inviting me here. It's my honor to be here with all of you. Really want to speak from the perspective of the propulsion system and industry. At Pratt, I think you know, we power the 5th generation F-22 and F-35 aircraft, as well as the F-16 and F-15s that are out there, and the B-21. So propulsion is definitely a critical component. And I was thinking, we're in a good position to be an industry partner, but truly it's our obligation to be an industry partner in the future and positively shape military aviation. I would say we definitely have a desire and critical need to gain speed, range, and improve performance, not just in future platforms, but in the current platforms of today. And it's from that perspective I'd like to hit on 3 topics. You've heard about each of them a little bit today already: collaborative combat aircraft, availability of spare assets, and contested logistics. So first, collaborative combat aircraft, or CCAs, which no doubt play an essential role in the future of air operations. Many experts are thinking that this is the way to capitalize on the potential that unmanned autonomous aircraft offer, and it might be the difference between winning and losing. CCAs will connect the battlefield in a way that we've never been able to before, from sensor to effector to decision maker. They're also essential in creating a connected, advanced, and autonomous network that can deter and counter future threats. However, the only way for us to have the kind of operational impact that we want is to get CCA solutions out to the field fast. And one way to do that is to think about the use of commercial off-the-shelf propulsion solutions or very close derivatives. The Air Force alone plans to procure more than 1,000 CCAs. It's likely that many of your teams are making plans to procure thousands more. To meet that demand, we feel that you need an active propulsion production line that has the capacity to support rapid fielding today, not tomorrow. Having enough CCAs to create affordable mass is important, but understanding how you plan to employ them is also critical. If you need a platform that can reach, persist, survive, then consider how you approach an integrated aircraft propulsion solution. Propulsion should not be viewed as a commodity. It's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's a key driver of capability for the overall system. Its speed, its maneuvering capability, electrical power, and survivability, as mentioned already today. The design and efficiency of propulsion can play a critical role in determining performance of the total weapons system. You might not have the full bandwidth, or together we can have better advanced tools for mission analysis and operational analysis that was spoken about today, and we can together help figure out where we need to make the best trades for performance, and cooperation together will be to everyone's benefit. We can help you understand a range of options and what capabilities move the needle when it comes to mission success. And these conversations have never been timelier, which brings me to my second topic, availability of spares and assets. One lesson reaffirmed from Ukraine is that you must have sufficient stockpiles of capable weapons prior to the start of any hostilities, which is especially true for propulsion. Whether it's an F-16, F-15, F-35, KC-46 tanker, C-17, or any other, you must consider whether or not you have enough spare engine assets or modules to meet your projected mission needs. Fully assess that situation. We need to be ensuring that we're having transparent conversations and sharing data together. While you're having these conversations, we need to think of ways to maximize engine performance during prolonged periods of battle. Because we build our engines with performance margin and safety margin, we can help you explore ways to keep your engines on wing longer in a way that maximizes performance while maintaining those safety levels that are needed. We have successfully done this in partnership with the U.S. Air Force on our F-119 engine for the F-22. We collectively have invested in propulsion engineering tools that allow us to combine customer aircraft flight data with our own maintenance engineering algorithms. This allows us to plan maintenance for when it's actually needed based on real world, very specific use of an engine instead of relying on historical general data and information. This not only maximizes readiness, but it also generates significant cost savings because you're keeping engines that have margin on wing longer and moving up others that need maintenance sooner to the front of the line. As you can imagine, this helps reduce the overall logistical burden, especially in a contested environment, which is my third discussion topic. For a large majority of recent history, our adversaries have lacked the ability to target U.S. and allied forces and supplies at fixed bases and during transit. That's no longer the case. Contested logistics is now a reality, and we're facing unprecedented threats to our defense ecosystem. Last year, Pratt & Whitney partnered with the Joint Program Office, our customer on the F-35, in a contested logistics study. The study focused on agile combat employment, or ACE, and specifically looked at how to best expand capacity within defense industrial base and how to defend and then recover from an attack. The lessons from that exercise include becoming more digital, which will help collectively improve data management, shorten decision cycle times, eliminate silos, and increase interoperability. In February, the U.S. Defense Department assessed critical defense supply chains, and one very specific call to action caught our attention. The ask was to advance our use of additive manufacturing, or what's often referred to as 3D printing, rapid prototyping, to exceed our current capabilities and facilitate resilience. So here goes my video if I do this right. Behind me, you'll see a TJ150 engine from Pratt & Whitney. It's a high-performance turbojet that powers tactical missiles, decoys, and effectors. It's also one of the engines we're looking at for affordable mass options. In the video, you can see as the externals are removed, it shows a clearer, high-level view of how many components go into this engine when it's traditionally manufactured. We since have optimized the design for 3D printing, which you can see being drawn now. We've reduced total part count from over 50 to just a handful. And the additive produced version of the TJ150 leverages a concept we call unitization to reduce total part count. As you can see the externals put back on, it looks just like a TJ150 and performs in the same manner. For us, additive manufacturing is a future because it allows for fewer parts, scalability, affordability, manufacturing flexibility. It also lessens pressure and an overburdened supply chain by making key parts on demand and even possibly in the point of need. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before we move on to Heidi Grant, the questions seem to be orientated around resilience, supply chains, and people. If anyone has a different question, please put that in to Slido. I promise it will be at the top. Heidi, thank you.
Well, I think you've already seen that we are one team because it's common themes that you're seeing across industry. And I can tell you when I joined industry a couple of years ago, I learned a really important vocabulary word, and it's called competimates. You know, there's days that my colleagues and I were in competition, but I can tell you that there's other days that it's very critical that we're mates, that none of us, or I would say all of us, really depend on different suppliers in industry. So just within industry, the importance for us to be one team can't be overstressed, and hopefully all of you are feeling that and seeing that today by the comments that were already made by my colleagues. But as far as the larger attendee audience here, each of us, we're here for the same reason. We all care about global security, whether you wear a uniform, you're in your governments, or your industry colleagues out there. We're all out there because of global security, and we care about our communities, our region, country, and the world to be safe. So I thought I would put my 4 takeaways for you, the 4 initiatives. You can't leave here without an acronym, so I'm going to use the acronym SAFE. So you think of the word SAFE, it's to scale, it's to advance, it's to fortify, and to engage. So it was already brought up a couple times today. We're talking about scale, and industry's role is how do we go from concept to capability with speed of relevance. So we're taking that to heart, coming up with, again, you heard from my colleagues about this innovative approaches. How do we enhance production capability with digital tools, with AI, 3D. There's so many things every day. We're bringing in the smartest talent we can find into industry to advance the production so that we're able to scale for future fight, but also for the fight today, for the unique requirements. So scale is the first thing that I wanted to highlight. And then when I say advance, this is where we need to continue to have innovative solutions because the fight continues to change. The fight today is much different than it was 5 years ago. So understanding and trying to project as we go forward. And here I want to put in, although none of us, we try to keep politics out of today, but we need to make sure that we bring in geopolitics. So when I look at different things like geographical changes around the world, climate changes around the world, and I'm just thankful that many of you have signed the agreement on sustainability because that's something we need to be thinking about as we look at advanced technologies in industry and how we're advancing to address those things that our communities care about and that are in our defense strategies now as far as looking at alternative fuels. So that was another topic on advancing and making sure that we stay aligned and understand what both the geopolitics and policies are along with the warfighter needs. The other thing that I want to talk about next is to fortify, so the F in the word safe. And Jill just brought this up a minute ago about contested logistics. Industry takes it very seriously it's not just about a platform. You're not going to be successful if we just throw a platform at you. It's about the sustained logistics that go with that. And we look at the complex environments right now and the threat to our logistics systems. This has become more important. So we're coming up with tools where you can do predictive analytics. You can understand when a part may need to be replaced in advance of a deployment. There's some success stories right here in the UK on the C-17 that I'm happy at a break to talk to any of you about some of those tools with predictive maintenance. But I think this is another thing that we just need to be thinking about. Is there a way, we're always looking at ways that we can deliver logistics autonomously, capabilities in that area. So again, just getting that innovation on how do we fortify the logistics chain for the capabilities. And then the last one that I wanted to bring up, to me, is one of the most important ones that you saw a theme through all my colleagues, and that's to engage. It's important that industry engage with our military, with our government leaders, with our politicians, early and often. And someone's already brought this up, but what I'm finding now on this side that I didn't realize when I was on the government side is how much you aren't in on those early discussions. Usually what I'm seeing is the military colleagues have decided or governments have decided a capability they need and they come over and ask for a capability, which that's great. Instead of just a system, you're asking for a capability. But now we're at a point where it's important for industry to be in there early on the concept stage as you're designing warfighting concepts, because we invest a lot of money in research and design and predicting what the next capability will be that you need. And it's not giving one company advantage over another. All of us should be signing non-disclosure agreements or whatever is needed, give a little blood, whatever you guys need. But I really believe that we need to make sure, because resources, both the financial resources, but even more importantly, the people, our talent, that we're putting our talent where you want our talent to be focused on innovation. So those are my 4 initiatives that you've heard these themes across the board. I just said it a little bit differently. It's about all of us being safe. And if you think of those 4 initiatives for global security and how industry is part of your team, we need to be embedded with you. We all have the same mission, and that's for global security. Thanks.
Thank you. The enduring theme, really, certainly from the Slido questions and the narrative the panel have said, is about resilience, depth, and working better together. It leads us on to the first question, which I'll select, and it's from Alan Androbus, who's definitely won a popularity contest. Within the commercial aviation and space sector, there is considerable pressure on supply chains and workforce. How would the panel address these issues in light of urgent need to increase defence production? So, Apples, can I come to you first on that one?
You said I'd have to look at you. I think we've all just touched on the supply chain issue. It's about demand and about predictability. Because when we go to our supply chain for things like semiconductors and things like that, our demand is nothing like, for example, the commercial motor market, not a scratch. So we become second tier into that. So it's about how we get working with our industrial colleagues to sort of pull that demand, longer term predictability, and then we'll get more agility from the supply chain. So I think realistically, it's a bit like when Heidi was talking. If we're in early on the requirement setting, then we can plan our supply chains through a longer time period, and therefore the supply chain itself is more content to take risk and invest as well. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think to put this in, analysis on a military kind of look at this, when you look at preparing as a coalition for a warfighting scenario, oftentimes you're looking at, okay, what strengths do each of you have? And then you want to make sure that there's no gaps and there's actually redundancy, whether it's air refueling, ISR, who's going to cover if somebody's not there? I mean, so that's kind of the conversation that happens in a military. It's the same thing, a coalition, if you will, of industry, that we've allowed ourselves gaps, we've allowed ourselves certain areas where there isn't redundancy, and we've identified that. I think COVID was a wake-up call for many of us, that now we at least have identified where there's potential gaps or where we need to have redundancies in the supply chain and allow some competition. So we're getting after it.
Then the next one I'll paraphrase really, and it's associated with coalitions. And we look at NATO from an industrial perspective. How can we better levy off these partnerships that we have across all the different nations to create a much more resilient military capability? And where are you starting to see those behaviours change?
So I'm happy to pick up on that. I think, as Heidi said, we all work as one team, and when a number of us work on common platforms, and if we take F-35, for example, looking across our supply chains and where we have common suppliers and making sure that we talk to them with one voice and making sure that we can understand the capacity they have, how can we look at the longer term planning horizon, and how can we put the right agreements and investments in place to ensure ourselves that we can all be resilient and we can depend on our supply chain to deliver on from a platform and product perspective, but also look across that from our industry partners. Because as Heidi said, we're sort of competing for capability within our supply chains, but our ability to share and talk with one another, and our customers need to be part of that process as well from a security perspective and those long-term planning horizons. But if you just think of this as one defence sector and the allies working together, the supply chain is just another part of that process. And there's an opportunity not just to look at it from a platform viewpoint, which I think we are doing, and we can still continue to do more. But if we looked at it from a cross-platform perspective as well, you will see more commonality and more challenges and opportunities about how we can engage with that supply chain, understand the capacity, where are the key risks and the touch points that we need to go and work on together. But it does come back to that transparency, being clear on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve together. But it's just that depth of looking at the defence sector as one whole force and one enterprise, and that supply chain work stream, and what are the risks and opportunities around that. Better engagement with our customers to get that transparency and clarity around the long term, but also as industry, how can we help our supply chains and not go in there prioritising over each other, but understanding what that means and plays out for the outcomes that we're trying to achieve for the forces that we work with.
Thank you. Heidi.
Yeah, so a little bit different lens on that is, we're listening to our NATO and actually global partners. A lot of people look at Boeing and they say, oh, you're a US company. But I want to say, no, we're a global company. And we're seeing a demand out there from NATO and worldwide partners for co-development. How do you build the defense industry in each of those countries? And it helps back to the geopolitics, right? That if we're able to provide through co-development jobs in each of your nations, it'll help both bring the capability to your country and to the coalition, but it also then helps back to the contested logistics. The more that we're spread out as industry to be able to maintain and have the maintenance is one, but production parts, to be able in a warfighting area to have this dispersed industry, the better off we're going to be and more competitive warfighting.
Thank you. I'm aware that we have primes up here on the panel, so I've picked quite a difficult question next. And it's from Chris Daniels from Flarebright. And it's, in a war footing, what is the best model for primes and scale-ups to work together? Is it a single national champion that hoovers them up, or a distributed SME innovation-led economy? Dave, I'll pass to you first.
Okay, so I think primes and the SMEs work very well together today. Our supply chain is made up of numerous SMEs, and we try to develop them and protect them because we get some great innovation from SMEs. And as we've said today, we haven't got the resources to do it all ourselves. So we need to work in a team and support that innovation. And lots of the innovation that's come from the UK industrial base over 100 years has come from what we like to call them boffins. And they come with innovation. And we need to sustain them because they haven't got the deeper pockets, the wider portfolios that we can balance. So we need to bring them in with us. We used to have, in the EW sector, which obviously Leonardo plays in, there used to be a concept and an organisation called Towers of Excellence. And that was made up of lots of SMEs and some of the primes. And where challenges and requirements came from the MOD, we would field that out and say, who's best to answer this? And it wasn't directly, it was always the prime. It might be we need a prime to help and protect the SME. But I think there's more to explore in the national champions, in those critical capabilities, and how a national champion basically herds that innovation together. It doesn't mean that national champion has to take every contract. It doesn't mean that. How can we protect that ecosystem and take it forward? So I think it can be a mutually beneficial relationship.
Okay, any more from the panel? Richard, there's a question straight for you from Arif, who is head of Royal Air Force Digital, actually. And it says quite a lot of our cyber vulnerability is due to legacy platforms from our supplier base. How do we manage these risks and balance the need for investment for greater resilience, integration, and investment in new systems?
So I think that the key really is to understanding what those vulnerabilities are, and then prioritising which solutions or which systems need to be replaced first, and just doing it in a logical manner. I mean, I don't think there's any there's no silver bullet to this. I think we do operate in a world where we do have to manage a lot of legacy systems. But by understanding where they are, what the risks are, what the vulnerabilities are, I mean, you can, at an architectural level, you can protect those systems, segregate those systems as are required. But really, it's an understanding of that, the footprint that you're trying to manage.
Thank you. And another question from Nick Maxley. Industrial strength has already been highlighted as a tool of deterrence. How do we manage and demonstrate this as one team across the military and industrial base.
I'll take it.
Jill,
Sure.
thank you.
So first of all, I was going to comment on it earlier. In the propulsion arena, very often we join with, you call them competimates, mostly in the commercial world, but we also do that in the military world and collaborate on, who is the expert on what portion, what components, et cetera. And we see that in the end, we provide a better solution by doing that. So it gets complicated, maybe at the beginning to set up the structure, but it's something that's been successful for decades across the bat. Much more of that, ensuring that we have that capability and thought process together is very important. And it also moves into the segment of sustainment, which has to be a global network for any aircraft and propulsion system together. So I think in both arenas, it's very important to make sure that we collaborate, we understand our expertise, and we find a way to be able to share that information and data.
Thank you. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'd like to raise lights and just take any questions from the audience, please. Great. We have a question at the back. If we get a mic there, please.
Hi, Wing Commander Andy Mitchell. I'm currently serving in NATO. It's not a question as much as an observation, if you'll allow me. Some really good comments. We opened up, Marshal, with the comments about World War II and how really it wasn't just a defence industrial base. It was the entire industrial base that was mobilised. We heard Justin's comments earlier that we could be going towards something that's total, that's all-encompassing. I think it's great to hear about competimates. It's great to hear about the role of primes with other industry. I think the only thing that disappoints me a little is, where's the Amazon? Where's the SpaceX? Where are these companies who actually could really contribute? Dave Appleby, you mentioned losing out to the motor industry. But if we go to this level, actually being able to harness that sort of simple additive manufacturing engineering process and stick it into the factories of the motor companies, of whoever, I would like to hope that, thinking that advanced governments might ask for this, that you are already working with those wider behemoths in wider industry to prepare to be the leaders for if we see that sort of total footing.
I would like to take the liberty of an answer, if that's okay. And if you look at contemporary war that's enduring and sovereign, what you actually see is, I'd say, a misappropriation, but an appropriation of the industrial sector into the defence sector. That is what happened in the Second World War. It's what happened in the First World War. If you are a manufacturing country, you can take that. It's just you can't get after the exquisite capabilities, but you can produce and produce in it. And autonomous collaborative platforms, or CCAs, are the great example, where we look at the old Soviet system mechanizing with an aspiration to fabricate shaheeds in their millions per year. It didn't come from an ACP organization that existed prior to warfare. So actually what I think is actually having an onshore Amazon, an onshore Ford, is a capability in its own right. You've just got to survive the first wave when the exquisite is attrited. Is there anything else industry partners want to say?
Just one point on that, Jim. I think one of our roles, all of us here, is to help the government and to educate, as we said earlier on in the first panel, and improve the national narrative. Because I think if you went down to your local pub or spoke to someone in the post office, they wouldn't be worrying about war. They're worrying about the potholes, where they can get a doctor's appointment. We've got to educate them that this is important because this protects their way of life. That protects them so they can vote like a lot of our countries have been doing over the last few weeks. So it's really important. We're seeing it in industry, and I'm sure Susan is as well, is that youngsters are being turned away in schools from thinking about defence because it's not a good career. And it's because it's being turned away for other narratives. So I think we do need to improve the national narrative. We need to highlight in a phrase recently, ethical value of defence. And I think we all need to be involved in that debate.
Happy.
Well, just one last comment on it. So that example on additive manufacturing is partnership, right? It's not necessarily going to be in my factory. We are already partnering on some, I'll say, exquisite areas for other engines that we have supply base, who I call partners, manufacturing in that manner? And also, ultimately, wouldn't it be great if I could just send a box and somebody just prints that asset when they need it? That's what we're looking for.
Right, time is up and it is lunch next. So I think the themes are SQEP, resilience, and actually valuing the defence industrial base and breaking down those transactional behaviours. I would like to thank the panel for actually what is a brave decision. There are 60 plus members of various air forces here, and it takes quite a lot to actually stand up and justify the defence industrial base to them. So thank you very much.